It was around 11 PM. I had just finished work, and I was waiting at the overground station that connected to parts of the underground in London. I used to have pretty much the same routine every day. I would finish my shift and catch one of the last services back home. The station I get on is one of the first on the line, quite far out from any of the major stops, so it's always deadly quiet. Sometimes I am even the only person in the entire station. It's an open air station, very poorly lit, and you can hear a constant drone noise of wind passing by at night. As per usual, I was sat down on a bench on my train's platform, waiting for my service to arrive. On the other side of the platform, across the tracks, I could see a shadow-like figure, dressed mostly in black, sat pretty much exactly opposite me. I believed he was staring at my direction, but I was not so sure, as our benches were facing each other, so it could have been a coincidence. I began feeling a bit worried, as he got up and started pacing around the platform. He then appeared to crouch down, as though he was going to jump down onto the train tracks. But just as he was about to do this, a train began approaching his side of the station, so he swiftly moved backwards. I was really freaked out, because I couldn't understand why he wanted to get on the tracks in the first place. Did he want to cross over to my side? Had he dropped something? I really just didn't get it. The train pulled into his side of the station, stopped for a good 30 seconds, and then carried on its journey. When the train pulled away from the tracks, the man was nowhere to be seen. I had assumed he'd gotten on his train and simply left, but I had the feeling I was not alone in this station. Something felt very off. Feeling uneasy, I walked over to my platform stairs. The stairs led down to a passageway that linked the platforms together. It was deadly quiet. Then, to my horror, I could see a shadow against the white wall, slowly moving in the direction of my platform. I then began to hear footsteps getting louder. The shadow continued moving towards my direction along the wall, until the figure then came into sight. At the bottom of the stairs, there he was. He originally looked like he was about to walk past and out of the station, but he suddenly stopped, almost frozen, at the bottom of the platform stairs. He turned his head and looked up at me, and put his foot on the first step. He continued very slowly walking up the stairs in my direction. He had a cap on, and his hood up. I could not make out his face at all. He continued walking up the stairs, pausing randomly every few steps, and looking behind him. He eventually got to the top of the stairs, and I could see how big and tall he was when he stood in front of me. He said absolutely nothing to me. I then saw him reach into his hoodie pocket. He was looking for something. He then pulled out a syringe and began playing with it in his hands, right in front of me. I could see the syringe had what looked to be blood or liquid inside it. He then began walking towards me with the syringe in his hands. I walked backwards, trying not to trip over. What he said to me next still makes me feel very ill and still haunts me today. He told me that he was HIV positive, and that if I didn't give him my purse, he would inject his blood into me with his syringe. I literally threw my purse in his direction. He picked it up, but still kept walking towards me. I bumped into a wall. He came very close to me. He then put the syringe near my neck. I said, "Please, no." He told me to shut up and said, "Thank you," before jogging away with my purse. I was so lucky that he didn't do anything more than just take my purse that night. The train station tightened security after this event, and the police never did catch him. I always worked the night shifts. I love them because of the double pay, and the fact that my days are free to do what I want. I remember on this particular day being quite frustrated because the train was late, and if I was over 10 minutes late for work, they would dock me the first hour. So this evening had already started off pretty badly. Also, subways are quite creepy at night too, so I really don't want to spend any more time down there at night than I really have to. The train pulled up, and I got on. There were a few people on the train, but not too many. I took my seat and began flicking through my diary, just killing time on my commute. Around 10 minutes into my commute, I could feel someone breathing behind me on the back of my neck. I initially took no notice, but after the breathing became heavier, and I could even begin to feel drops of saliva, I turned around to see this middle-aged guy with his head literally inches away from me. I was going to tell him to sit back as he was way too close, but I decided to just move seat at the next stop to avoid making a big scene. Once we got to the next stop, I changed seats and moved a few rows away from the man. Sadly, the only seat available was facing in the freak's direction. He was practically undressing me with his eyes. This guy was just horrible. He had like a blank, dumb look on his face and only looked at me and nowhere else. I feel like one of those arrogant teens that thinks the world revolves around them while writing this, but that is seriously how he looked at me. Suddenly the subway carriage lights went out. We were in a very dark tunnel at this point, so everything was pitch black. A good minute or so went by in complete darkness, when I began hearing strange noises coming from very close by. I couldn't make them out. It was weird, a lot of ruffling and movement. It was a sound I couldn't quite make out. Out of nowhere, the lights came back on in our carriage, and there he was. The complete freak had his pants pulled down and was going to town on himself, still looking at my direction. He jumped with shock when he realized the lights had come back on in the carriage. I picked up my stuff and got off at the next stop, and made a complaint about what had happened. The police arrested him a few stops later. The guy was a complete wacko, and a registered sex offender. This was not the first time he had done something like this. I will never understand why freaks like this are allowed to walk the streets. This story is something that happened to me when I was 13 years old. I was a tourist in London. I was visiting with my family. We had really had a great holiday up to this point. We were riding the London Underground, which would be the equivalent to the subway in North America. Me and my family had been out sightseeing all day, and were on our way back to the hotel. The Underground was packed, and all the metro cars were packed full. We have quite a big family. There is 6 of us, so we agreed that if any of us got lost, we would meet up at the exit of Leicester Square Station, close to where our hotel was. We had to take a few different connections to get home. We arrived at our second stop, and we began changing to our next connection. I could see that the train was jam-packed full. My parents and brothers and sisters jumped on, but I got caught up at the back of a crowd. The doors started to close. I was the only family member not on at this point. My dad tried to stop the doors from closing, but with no success. My dad then shouted something to me, but I couldn't hear him. The train then pulled away. I was now on my own in a strange city, and this was before the days when everyone had a cell phone, so there was nothing I could do aside from make my way to Leicester Square. I caught the next train, and I remembered clearly which stop the next change was at because my dad had mentioned it before we got split up. The only issue is that at the next change I had no idea which metro line to take next, and I would need to ask someone for help. I was very nervous about this because I was so young and my English was quite poor at the time. I got off and looked around. I couldn't see any members of staff to ask for help. I continued walking around until I stopped and asked a friendly-looking guy, probably in his 30s, for directions. He helped me look at the metro line board and told me to follow him and that he would take me to the right platform. I was super grateful, as I really had no clue where I was going, and there was literally no staff in sight to ask for help. He began asking me where I was from and why was I on my own. We talked back and forth as we walked through the underground station together. Everything was going okay, but I began feeling suspicious of him when we walked past almost every busy line and ended up on a platform that was pretty much empty. Our hotel was in a very touristy area, so I couldn't believe it would be on such a quiet line. "Here we are," he said. "Let's go down to the end of the platform, as we can get the best seats down there," he told me. I didn't want to follow him at all, but he began walking and told me again to follow him. He was sort of aggressive. I gathered at the time maybe that he was annoyed because he was doing me a favour. I reluctantly walked after him. We got to the end of the platform. There was nobody around, just me and him. He told me that he was getting on the same train and that he would continue helping me. I began getting butterflies, and I could feel my hands beginning to sweat. Things really didn't seem to be adding up at all. The next train pulled in, and as it did, the man turned to me with a real angry look on his face. I looked down, and in his hand he had a very small Swiss Army knife. I didn't even see him reach for anything. He then reached his hand over towards my head. I then felt his hand go over the top of my head, and he grabbed my backpack and pulled it straight off me. He then told me to stay still as he walked onto the train. He looked back at me as the train doors were about to close and shouted, "Have a great day at school, Dave. See you at home." The train doors then shut and the train sped off, leaving me at the platform. In my backpack, I had my camera, money, and some souvenirs. I eventually made my way back to my family. The holiday was pretty much ruined, but I did make it into the national newspaper, so that is something, I guess. Hi there everyone, I just wanted to quickly say thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed the video, and it really means the world to me that you choose to listen to my content, and I cannot thank you enough for doing that. If you enjoyed the video, please leave a like, and if you want to leave a comment, please feel free. I always enjoy reading those, and I always try to reply to as many as I can. Thank you very much for listening, and subscribe for more real life horror from me, the Lord of Terror.